Hi everyone, welcome today to today's webinar on 5 steps to developing push applications based, push apps based in the age of connected devices. With us today, it's myself, Sheetal Jaitley, head of biz dev for a while over at Pivotal, and I've been working closely in the IoT space, and joining me today is Mark. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I've been working in mobile, developing applications and platforms and products for about 10 years.
We want to thank everybody for joining us today. I'll give you a quick intro into Pivotal. We work in 3 major areas, and in the life cycle of applications, these three areas play a critical role, and Pivotal is uniquely positioned here with a great value prop in all 3. One, we do application development services, which applications these days, and something we're going to talk about today, feed a lot of data and have a lot of data coming through them, and we have a big data suite of products that we've been growing and have been known for. But our main initiative with our products is everything has to be hosted somewhere, and for us, we look at what's going to be the operating system of the cloud, and that is our version of Pivotal Cloud Foundry. And so that's a little bit about us, but I want to talk a little bit more about today's topic and why it's so interesting. We're going to be talking today about the growth and popularity of push notifications. And, you know, as I look at my phone, and not only my phone, I look at more and more devices being connected, this is starting to change the design, Mark, of the way we operate. We're getting more and more push, and the messaging that we get has to be a key component. And so I'd love to hand it off to you and learn with you, and I'll do some questions back and forth. We'll go through Mark's slides here, and if you have any questions, please do type them into the Q&A box on your screen, and we'll address them at the end.
Yeah, so as you said, Sheetal, the growth and popularity of push notifications is really changing the design of how we build apps. As we seek higher engagement and broader use of our apps, messaging is becoming a critical component of a great app design. And if you look back at the first generation of apps that didn't have push notifications, then along came push notifications and people started to use them. And now those push notifications have much more features on them. You can actually have images associated with them, call to action, buttons. So it's starting to change that, and I wanted to take you a little bit through the trends in messaging that are changing our design paradigm. So traditional messaging has been moving away from the trouble changing slides here. There we go. So traditional messaging has been moving from the operator's SMS to messaging apps provided by third parties called over-the-top messaging, or OTT. And OTT messaging typically has more features than SMS. It enables chat, group, picture messaging, those kinds of things, and it's free or much cheaper than traditional SMS. And operators, although they started to offer IP messaging through services like RCS and Join, the rollout and the take-up by consumers has been pretty slow. And it's unlikely that consumers are going to adopt operator-specific messaging apps on a large scale because they want to message all of their friends, not necessarily the ones on a specific operator's network. In order for it to be successful, it's really going to have to work across networks.
So by operating messaging, Mark, you mean I got my telco provider, they have a messaging service within there, or it might even be my phone provider, the maker of my phone, and have their specific messaging in there, and so then I'm in a closed ecosystem and I'm not able to message with everyone.
Yeah, so there is a standard called RCS, so the brand name is Join, that is coming out across operators, but not a lot of them haven't implemented yet.
Okay.
And so that's going to be their challenge to the messaging services. And I think T-Mobile has just launched it in the U.S. And also many OTT apps don't provide or do provide an alias so that you don't have to share your phone number, which is something that the operators always kind of have you do up front. So if you wanted to have messaging such as, and don't want to give your phone number out because you don't want to be called, that's kind of an important consideration.
Sure.
The other element that's kind of important is that SMS traffic and use has been falling. Since 2012, when we reached the highest volume, globally it's been falling, and depending on the region, it's falling between 5% and 20% per year. And so younger demographics who send more messages, as you can see from these charts, are also more likely to use OTT apps rather than traditional SMS. And so carriers need to find new sources of messaging revenue and offer some of these newer services. From the perspective of size-wise, WhatsApp is now 50% bigger than global SMS.
Just that one application alone?
Just that one application.
Wow.
So it's growing rapidly, and it's replacing a lot of SMS and some email use. And app messaging with push notifications is also replacing SMS use. So you can see from this chart just the growth of just WhatsApp and how it's become so huge. And this consumer use is also driving now enterprise trends. You've probably heard of Slack. Slack is an enterprise messaging service, and in less than 2 years, it's grown to 1.1 million users, 300,000 paid accounts, and 25 million in annual recurring revenue. Right, so that's kind of a 1-year view on the right and 2-year view on the left. And mobile users and millennials are less likely to use email, more likely to use messaging, and this is now starting to emerge in the enterprise, where messaging services like Slack are starting to get popular.
So Mark, that's pretty cool. I mean, Slack has been one of the companies that always gets talked about these days, one of the fastest rising companies, one of the newest, quickest companies to become the unicorn per se. I leave that in quotations. But what is some of the keys that they're doing, and what are some of the key attributes contributing to their success?
Well, a lot of it has got to do with how corporations are working more efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
So we can set up channels, and people can have transparency as to what's happening on a particular topic.
Sure. Hashtag topic.
You can search through all of these messages to get to what you're looking for. So it's starting to really improve employee productivity and improve communication in the company, and that's why they're starting to use this. Not to mention the fact that it's more efficient than email in terms of reading it.
Okay.
As these messaging services are.
I think Microsoft yesterday just announced an email version of messaging without a lot of the email stuff we don't want to see.
That's right. But I think it's only accessible if you have an Outlook account.
Okay.
So looking at push notifications, and you've all heard of Urban Airship and seen the rise in use of push notifications. App messaging is also increasing, and this is really, push notifications are the most popular app messaging system. Volume has been increasing because users have gained experience and recognized the efficiency of push versus pull. And so this has become really popular. And it's only a matter of time before the traditional telecom services start to realize this and offer services in this regard. One of the reasons that this is so popular is that the traditional search model for discovery is starting to break. We've got so much information, so many apps running on our phones, that we're less likely on mobile and wearables to want to hunt and search for things. We're more likely to react to a notification. And so the notification has, in a sense, become the app. Apps that use these notifications have got higher engagement, they've got more app usage, and they generate increased revenue. And remember, most mobile interactions are 25 to 30 seconds. So being able to get a push, take a few actions associated with that, and do something, or even just get the notification if it's an informational message, is kind of important.
Mark, don't you find, and something I've been finding is irrelevant push that's been coming to you? I mean, push notifications are critical to companies, but I don't want to be pushed a whole bunch of information on me. I mean, I'm a firm believer that my phone knows me better than my wife. I mean, it knows where I am, it knows what I'm doing, it knows my calendar, knows what apps I have installed. Even the apps that I'm using know, if it's a news app, which sections I'm going to. If it's a TV app, if it's another media app, they know what I'm watching and what I always go back for. So how are you finding companies how are companies working to become more contextual and be more relevant in a person's day-to-day? That's the first part. And the second part of my question is, what happens if you don't do that? Like, do you have any stats for us on if you just start sending blanket pushes out?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things you got to be careful of, and we'll talk through that as we go through the 5 steps. You don't want to be just sending out a barrage of pushes, right? That's definitely what you don't want to do, because the first thing that will happen is your app will either be disabled or deleted, right? And we've had that happen to a few folks out there in the industry, and they've
because
suffered.
once you turn somebody's push notifications off, there's no way to prompt them to turn it back on, right?
Yeah, it's much harder. Once you lose your audience, it's much harder. So the way to do that, and we'll talk through that, is incrementally to provide the user some control, to make sure that you get them engaged in what they want to see as opposed to just giving them everything. We'll walk through a couple of apps that are starting to give very fine-grained control as to the interests and topics that they want to get. The push notification, I just want to walk you through what a push notification looks like, because it's not enough to have a notification provider, which is the Google or the Apple or the Microsoft. You really want to have a push service provider who provides you, simplified development, because you can interact with their SDK. They provide the capability for you to do better targeting. They can segment the audience based on interest, based on user history. They provide analytics when you push, so you can actually analyze the campaign and look at who it went to, how successful it was, and get analytics related to that. And of course, being able to enable scalability, which is an important part. Push notifications can significantly rise depending on whether you're doing a promotion or if you suddenly have a large audience compared to your usual users. And so it's important to have that push service provider. What happens is you register with the notification provider, you register with your push service provider, and then as you create the pushes, they'll create it and send it out to the right devices, which go out to the notification provider and on to the devices. So that's kind of how this works. Push notifications are actually the most powerful way to engage mobile users. You can actually customize the message. You can update tiles and widgets with current information. We know from studies that have been out there that it doubles app retention, and it increases user engagement by over 25%. And in some cases, people have said 100%, 200%. User segmentation really enables you to send targeted content specifically to users, and that's an important part of this. Push messaging drives usage, and it increases loyalty.
So just on that, Mark, again, we were talking a little bit about the news apps, and you and I have worked on a slew of news apps here at Pivotal. One of the things that, news apps in particular, I find is that you may have multiple apps out there that are from news providers, and it's always the one who gets you the push first is the one that becomes most relevant to you that day, right? And so the person who comes in second essentially has a lot to lose in that case.
Yes. We've had major sports league providers actually move service providers because the pushes were slower. So they need to get to somebody who's fast, who's reliable, who's robust. And it's going to be an ever more important feature is you've got to find a service provider who can deliver to your level of service. For those customers in Major League Sports or in breaking news, you just don't want to be number 2 or number 3 or number 4 because
there's a lot to lose.
You're not going to get the engagement into your app, and people are going to drop you from their list. It's just one of those features of news in the mobile app world these days. We know that push notifications have a respectable opt-in rate across industry. In some industries, you can see they're significantly higher, but all across the board, about half of people are opting in to push notifications on iOS. Obviously, in Android, you opt in automatically. And we can see that there's significantly higher app engagement as well. So definitely something that we keep an eye on and use for our customers. We also know that push notifications drive higher conversions. And now that, once you send the push out and you've got the user's attention, can we convert them? And again, studies show that we can. You can drive a higher rate of conversion. Because these notifications can be location triggered, because they're personalized, They can be in the moment offers, so you're near a store and the offer comes to you, or you're at a stadium and a concession offer comes to you. These are much more likely to get conversions.
Right.
And of course, there are other ways to trigger notifications as well. For example, beacons, where you can use beacons to actually do a more location-based trigger.
So this is exciting times for, especially for those of us working in digital, is now we're able to go ahead and extend our value proposition or our unique identifier to our customers at the right time, at the right place, and this is something that wasn't able to do before.
Right.
So beacons is something interesting, very, very interesting to me. You could also have too many beacons out there and you'd be being notified way too often. You know, if there's a coffee shop downstairs and every time I walk by, just because it's in my building doesn't necessarily mean I want to be pushed an offer for coffee. How would you suggest people use beacons, A, and B, you know, how do they find the right mix to make sure they put the relevant offer in front of the right customer at the right time?
So I think beacons are kind of a short distance mechanism. You have to be within 50 meters versus geofences, which can be done as well. And you want to make sure that as the beacons get updated through the day. So you don't want the same message going out to every customer all day.
Sure.
Right. So there's a number of retail systems that can do that now.
Or someone has received the offer already, you don't need to push it to them again.
Yeah. I seem to be stuck here in the moving to the next slide.
We just have a little technical difficulty here. While that spins and we start working on that, how do you find things such as Watch or Google Glass? All these new realms are coming into the picture where the watch is providing you notifications, and if you are wearing Google Glass and walking around in public, I hope you haven't been hit yet. But how is that working? Like how do notifications play a role in the more ever so changing digital meets physical world?
So I think the whole wearable scenario is making notifications much more popular. Mm-hmm. Right now, if you looked at smartwatch, for example, essentially the killer app is notifications because they're so easy to read. You get a vibration, so you don't miss them.
Right, the haptic nature of notifications could be huge, right? Buzz me 3 times if my wife is calling, buzz me once if it's anybody else.
Right.
Whatever it may be.
So it's just going to increase the number of notifications. All right, we seem to have been able to get into the step 1. Okay. So let's talk about the 5 steps, and we'll come back to wearables at the end. The first thing that you want to do in terms of figuring out how to use notifications in your app is to figure out how it'll fit naturally with the flow of your app. And you kind of have to know what are the interactions with customers or users that are going to happen inside your app. What kind of pushes do you have? We call them transaction pushes, where maybe you're doing an update to a flight that was already purchased, or you're sending out a shipping notice for something that you bought. Those are kind of transaction pushes, and they're probably more a bit informational. You don't need to necessarily have the user interact with them.
Because that'd be pretty cool. I use my credit card and I get a push alert right away that my credit card's been used and where. That'd be very interesting to me.
Yeah. And those kinds of pushes are on the increase because they're very lightweight, especially with wearables. If you're getting a push and you don't have to interact with it or do anything, it's a great information, right? You don't have to try and hunt for an app and go and check what's going on in that particular app.
Or, God forbid, my card's being used and I wasn't using it.
An engagement push is a bit different because you do want to have a call to action. You want to have somebody interact with that, whether it's acknowledge it or go back, interact with the app itself to make a change. And so you want to think carefully about where in the life cycle of your app people are going to use a transaction push versus an engagement push. And then for each of those, you want to figure out how that's going to represent itself on the phone or on a watch, right? Okay. Because we have what we call lightweight interactions now with a watch. Just trying to switch to the next slide here again. All right. So step 2 is about giving the user control. We want to allow users to select categories of push. You don't want to send the same push information to everybody. And if needed, you want to allow them to control the time window. There's nothing more annoying than having pushes happen all through the night because the app is coming from a different time zone than you are.
Sure.
So it's important that people get control.
In the middle of the night, you don't want them necessarily wake up to read it.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes people are on shift. They work shift. So you really want to give the user control on when do they get notified and what do they get notified on, right? That's really important because people who have control will exercise that and will keep your app running and will select the right categories. And you can see the Hooks app and the Push app, which are relatively recent apps that push all sorts of news and alerts, allow you to actually go in and select the categories that you want. Now, I wish the newspaper apps, the news apps would give me this kind of control over what they send to me.
Sure.
Right?
I think some are doing them. I know some are.
They are. They're just starting to. They're starting
sure.
to, right? And they're still, if you look at the news apps, most of them are sending maybe 3 to 5 notifications per day.
Mm-hmm.
And even out of those, 2 would probably be real important breaking news.
Well, I just recently got one right now that said NASA's found another planet that's very similar to Earth.
Exactly.
Pretty cool push notification that happened
so
while we're on this call.
Where we're going with this is people are going to expect much more. They're going to expect 20 to 30.
Right.
And when you start to do that number, people want control. They don't want to find, fashion news if they're not interested in fashion. They'll turn your app off. They want the ability to control.
But this is a lot of so this is great, and I think this is where we got to go. But this is also, Mark, very user-centric, where it's on the user to customize the app. I like living in a world of like Google Now and Siri and everything, where hey, just tell me what you should know me by now and just do it for me. I want to be a very lazy user. So.
Right. And I think that's going to come. I think right now we're still at the stage where a lot of companies are building up or have a user history but don't know how to use it.
Sure.
But with big data and machine learning, that's the recipe that you're going to use to solve this problem, right?
Right.
Ideally, you want your newspaper to already know your interests, to already know the stories you've read.
Sure.
And build your interest profile.
Sure.
And have that as the default for you when you enter the app.
Absolutely.
And that's coming.
I think it's like on Gmail when you set up your priority inbox, or on the new Outlook for iOS that has a focused inbox. It just naturally kind of figured out what's important to me and what's not.
Yeah.
And so you want a seamless transition through that.
Sorry, let's get back to step 3, which is about being timely and relevant.
Yes.
And that's kind of an important part. So one example of that is a weather app that allows you to customize the reminders and notifies you to take an umbrella. It'll rain today before you leave in the morning.
Sure.
Right?
Why don't you tell me
having that contextual and being timely enough, as opposed to pushing you the weather when you get to the office and you realize, oh dear, it's going to rain.
Google Now is pretty scary when it like pings you and says you better leave. There's an accident on the highway and there's a lot of traffic. You're running out of time to get to your meeting.
Exactly.
It's pretty scary, but also very useful.
Yeah, and that's an example of combining settings from you, user history, location,
reading my calendar, reading my Gmail.
Yeah,
it's kind of scary.
And part of that being timely again is being quick enough. Remember, no one remembers who pushed the breaking news second and third, as we said earlier.
Right.
Right. You got to make sure that you're in there among the leaders, getting your notifications out early. As we get into step 4, again, step 4 is about using location and personalization. And we talked about big data, machine learning, user history, so that we can predict, as never before, what you might be interested in or what your preferences would be. And here, an example of Netflix is a great example of recommendations based on your history. So based on your viewing history, they will push you an update on this movie's just been added to the catalog. You might be interested in watching it.
Or Spotify with generating cool playlists.
And location-based triggers are also powerful. So a sports update, just as you enter a stadium, would be nice, or an offer for the concession stands, right? So we've been able now with the technology, you can have location-based notifications. You can create geofences around several or one of your stores or your stadiums or your theaters. And as you enter or exit, and you can choose, which it is, it could be a different message for each, you can send a notification for that.
Okay. Step 5.
So on to step 5, and step 5 is kind of interesting. It's about selecting a capable service provider, right? And there's a very, very large variation among push service providers because quality and performance just varies across them. So one of the things you need to do is decide what your performance levels are, what information and analytics you need to know. You need to decide, do you want to own this data and use it for data mining? Because some of these providers, they own the data.
Sure.
And you can't get it. And analytics is crucial. Remember, these users who are receiving your notifications and have let you notify them and are interacting with them, these are your most engaged users.
Right.
Right? So they're more likely to be an opportunity to take them from a $50 a purchase user to a $200 a purchase user, as some of our customers have done by using notifications wisely. Carriers are not yet offering push messaging services, so you will start to see the large service providers come in and do this. And large brands, as I said, are already moving their push services to the faster, more reliable providers. And telecom providers, and when they enter this, just like they did with SMS back in the day, it's going to be important for them.
Should be a value-added service for a telco company to offer one day. So there's very reputable providers out there. Also, so just to quickly recap in your 5 steps, from what I'm understanding, is you got to be really contextually aware. Start communicating one-on-one. Location is a key to put to the provider the right offer, and then segmenting your audience to make sure, hey, how can we speak to them?
Yeah, and give the user control, don't forget.
Give the user control. Give the user control. So these are the things you should be looking for in your providers.
So getting back to wearables, which we were talking about, as I said, notifications are currently the killer app for smartwatches. In fact, Apple Watch Glances allows you to have notifications without forcing an interaction, which we find very useful. And so wearables is just going to increase the use of notifications across the board, right? And it's only just begun. If you look at your phone today, we probably get 10 to 20 notifications. I fully expect that within a year or two to be at 100 a day.
Sure.
And we won't,
there will be a lot of noise, but it's got to be relevant.
Yes, it's great.
Right.
Right. As long as it's relevant, sending you the science story of the day because you're interested in science, or it's sending you the fashion tweet of the day.
The Kim Kardashian news of the day because you're a fan of hers.
So, and don't forget the Internet of Things is coming as well. So this is several billion connected things, and they're connecting to back-end systems. And those back-end systems are responsible for figuring it out. When do we need to send a notification or an alert to users? And so those several billion things are going to also push stuff out from Dropcam, Nest, all of these various Internet of Things.
And so a notification, we've been talking a lot about visual notifications, but a notification could also be a haptic vibration of some sort that tells you.
It could. It could be text. It could be an image associated with text.
Sure.
It can have some fancy interactive, there's interactive notifications now where you can write in the notification itself.
Sure.
You can take actions, and
I saw a very cool messaging app the other day that you could reply right within the notification.
Yeah. So in summary, messaging has evolved, and that's why push has become an imperative. There are significant new engagement paradigms now for applications, and you need to think through what's your push notification strategy that's unique to your app. And just in closing, we do have a push notification service product. Pivotal is really focused on creating software products for enterprises and service providers to build applications and services. You can contact us for help in transforming your business, becoming agile. and building great software applications.
Or even strategy on how to build the right push notification strategy to move forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. At this point, we're going to move on to some questions. I'm just going to check here if there's any. All right, so we do have one. Here's a question, Mark. For a company that doesn't take advantage of big data, how would you suggest we become more contextual?
So one thing that you talked about is strategy. You got to figure out from your application with your users what information you need in order to be, quote, contextual. And that information is probably already somewhere in your database of systems in your enterprise. The trick is figuring out how to get that information. You can either leverage it where it is in a data warehouse, for example, or you can take it and copy and put it into our big data solution. And then once it's there, then we build an application that draws on that information to create these notifications, to create a user profile.
Okay.
Right.
You want to
and
create
that's what
segments.
Pivotal does. We have Pivotal Labs that actually specializes with data scientists in building those kinds of applications.
Okay. And is that, and so that's something that you suggest if I'm not currently doing that, is that something you're suggesting people are getting way ahead of right now?
Absolutely. I think there was a quote from one of the gurus in the business world that said companies that haven't figured out math and haven't figured out machine learning and haven't figured out data science will disappear within the next 10 years. And it's true. Like every company needs to start to line up partners or the capabilities within their enterprise to have this capability.
Okay. Do you find before you get into the big data suite and also data science, what are some low-level things that companies should be doing? Like, what are some low-weight, tomorrow I should just go ahead, take a look at my app and my current analytics, and what should I do?
It's a tough question because it varies by industry and among companies. But I think the first one is to kind of figure out a strategy, right? You've got to have a strategy. What's your digital business? You got to figure that out. Do you have data that is tied up and sitting untapped? Right?
Sure.
And be able to figure out how to use that data in a new way. And that's what these systems, big data, which gives you very cheap processing and very large storage, machine learning, which figures out algorithms and models that you can apply in an automated fashion. That's what these are about.
All right, so we have another question based on bandwidth. Could you elaborate more on what kind of bandwidth issues could be faced? I think you were talking earlier about sports leagues. I think that's a pretty cool one on how you could talk about how bandwidth issues.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more bandwidth is obviously in these types of services related to the speed of processing. So it's CPU, it's network, it's the amount of memory. But essentially, you want to be able to get from I'm sending a notification to the end user's device quickly and reliably, right? And a lot of the bandwidth in terms of CPU capacity, network, and bandwidth sits with the telecom companies, right? And so it's really important that the telecom companies step into this type of service because they hold the capability to make it much faster.
Okay.
Right. And as the volume picks up, literally being able to do a quality of service between some of these customers. So maybe prioritizing the major sports league push notification of a touchdown versus somebody else's push notification of a retail offer that's coming up next month. Those kinds of decisions need to be made.
Okay. You got another question here. Is there a way to target push notifications to very specific geographic locations? If we take New York City, for example, I just want to target this to a section in the Upper West Side.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can pick a location and set up what's called a geofence. The radius varies. Obviously, there's a minimum radius, I think, of about 100 meters, but you can go broader than that.
Okay.
and everybody who's using your particular app in that area will receive this message.
So very cool. If it's election night, you could essentially send me a push notification just based on my jurisdiction, saying here's the person who's leading the polls or losing the polls,
absolutely.
Or this is what happened to them in the news, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, and that's what's coming as this becomes more commonplace and more broadly used. We're going to be using location-based notifications much more than we have been in the past.
Okay.
That's definitely.
So just a personal question for me now to elaborate on that, is there a fair game to push? If I could do that, then why wouldn't I geofence my competitor's location? Let's say I'm a car dealership and I'm car dealership A and you happen to walk into car dealership B, but you have my car's app on your phone. Would it be fair game for me to go ahead and send you a push notification, knowing that now that I know that you've walked into my competitor?
There is. Obviously, you have to be running my app.
Right.
Right.
No, I'm saying you downloaded my app in that case.
But yeah, absolutely. In the same way that today, when you, if you pay a premium to Google and you take your competitor's keyword,
sure.
When they search for Acme and you show up at the top of the Google search page because you paid for that,
sure.
That same concept is going to apply in this notifications business. Right? You can pick your competitor and you can target that area for push notifications.
Perfect.
But you want to be careful. Notifications are not ads. They got to be informational. So maybe you do it as an offer for a car dealership or a free test drive, and in that way, it's not just blatant advertising. It's a little.
Well, maybe not. Maybe I know you went to that location, you've left, and half an hour later I hit you with come by and have a free test.
Correct. Yeah.
A free oil change or whatever it is, just to have lure you back. Okay, very cool. Mark, just in closing, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Pivotal stack of products. I know we got a ton of information here at Pivotal, not just on push, but on a variety of topics based on the three pillars that we discussed at the beginning of this conversation. But in summary, do you want to talk a little bit about what people should be doing to get in touch with us and how they can maybe get in touch with you to offer some sort of service back to them? I know we've been talking about you have some metrics for doing a pretty cool cost-benefit analysis, also or even more importantly, a cool strategic plan as an offer that for people who attended this webinar, something that we could really help a lot of the people who have dialed in and have been watching today.
Yeah, I think we've got the email address for Joel on the screen, and I think that's the best contact point. If somebody wants to have a discussion about how to use push notifications better, or maybe even to have that service, or in terms of a mobile strategy, have us evaluate what they do. There's a number of different ways that we could help move this along. And we already do a number of these with our service provider partners and with some of our push provider partners as well.
Sure. So the key is here, get in touch with Joel. We'll be able to help you. And last but not least, we actually just got two more questions that came in, Mark. I know we're coming close to time, but let me try to get you to answer everything we have here. Do you wrap your Google notification services in your own jar/service?
Do we wrap?
Apple and Google notification services.
So the way that our service works is there's a client SDK library that you will use on the mobile device, whatever mobile device it is that you're using, and on the server side, we have a push server that will do a lot of the heavy lifting around making sure that we collect the registrations from your users when they opt in to the app, to the push for your app. If they decide to leave or disable it, we track those. We manage topics and categories so your app can group your users and segment them. We help with targeting. We do the location-based targeting and push, and then we hand off and schedule the pushes to the notification provider.
Perfect. And two, most apps ask for push opt-ins when new users launch an app for the first time. What are best practices for maximizing opt-ins rather than being nervous since they're just using the app for the first time?
So I think you're going to have to think through the 5 steps really for that. So the opt-in is only for iOS. Android automatically, once you load an app,
Sure.
the opt-in is 100%. But you have to kind of, usually the best way is to give the user a pop-up or through your wizard when you're going through the app setup, tell the user that you are providing push notifications and allow them to opt in or not. Be very clear in that one little dialogue what they're opting into, because they don't want a barrage of notifications. And have them be able to do this gradually. So give them some control. Maybe they start with 2 out of 10 settings enabled, and then they can add more as they go along.
Okay.
Right, and so you want to lead them gently down the path.
Yeah, there's a couple sports networks that do a pretty cool job of how they do it. It's like, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself, which teams you like, what sports you like, and then I'll start feeding you some information. You can go even deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah, there's nothing more powerful than you sitting there and get a notification, and it's your favorite team playing, and they just took the lead.
Right.
Right. That is a huge call to action, and nobody. An advertising guy once told me this.
It gets me in trouble when I take my wife out on a date. But yeah.
Yeah, when that information is presented, people
really
don't
happy.
consider it advertising.
Sure.
It's information that you needed to know, and so that's kind of what you want to have. Every notification needs to have that context of, wow, you really need to know this, and it's going to help me. And here's a quick way to get value from that.
Perfect. That seems to be it for questions. I want to wrap up here. Mr. Mark Tacuna, thank you so much for taking your time and doing this. Once again, for everyone, if you want more information or have any questions regarding anything we talked about today, and please do reach out to Joel Zion. His email is up here, and he will be able to facilitate any one of us here in our organization to come to the aid, whether that be strategy for us to do some of the assessments we talked about, or even just to answer any of your questions. Please do reach out to us. And thank you so much for attending.